You are listening to an episode of Megan is Not a Parent, But. And this episode is brought to you by my Positive Parenting Class Pass. Positive Parenting Class Pass is 6 simple positive parenting classes to kickstart your positive parenting journey. You can get started today at bekindcoaching.com/classpass. In today's episode, we will be chatting about how mom guilt is actually mom shame. So I invite you to get cozy, grab your notebook, and let's dig in. Welcome to Megan is Not a Parent, But, the podcast where I, your host, Megan Ford, former early childhood educator turned positive parenting coach, helps parents just like you learn how to deal with your strong-willed child's difficult behavior. I've been described from my clients as a blend between Brene Brown and Miss Frizzle, you know, the one from the Magic School Bus. I help bring awareness and hold space for the hard conversations and make big concepts like behavior and relationships and temperaments easy to understand and easy to implement. If you're a parent who struggles with your child's loud, dramatic, disruptive, over-the-top behavior, but don't think a parenting coach would help you because those are just for the bad parent or those parents, then this episode is especially for you. I invite you to grab a journal, cozy blanket, a warm beverage, and enjoy what you're about to explore. All right, if you are listening to this episode now, then you are familiar with my work, you are familiar in my teaching style, and you're familiar with the content that I produce. And this content is often seen as shaming parents for what they do. And when I started to really dig into this work and kind of what elicits those feelings, I think it's natural. I think it's natural to feel shame when we have been shamed and when we are encountering something that's reflecting back, something that we feel shameful for. And this always comes out in comments on social media or comments to someone who's outside of the work. And what they say to me is they call me a mom shamer, or they say, you know, stop shaming moms, and they get kicked into a very strong defense. And I want you to know, I get it. Learning positive parenting methods and becoming accountable to the ways that we show up in our relationships in the parent-child dynamic is a very vulnerable and sensitive topic. And it's natural that when faced with information that challenges some of your current behaviors or your current methods and strategies, it's natural to be like, oh shit, like, that sucks, or this feeling of immense guilt and shame come up. And I think this conversation that I want to have is I want to just pause there in that moment of like, what's really going on? And then how can we move past it? Because how I normally see this play out is it's being met with defense. And the defense is saying things like, well, we're doing the best that we can, right? And we kind of use that as like an excuse. It's like, well, we're just doing the best we can. And I get it. And I am like, yeah, we are. So let's reflect back and say, hey, are we in alignment with the impact that we're making? Like, because if we're doing the best we can, and this is the impact, then it's natural to say, hey, let me get into spaces that allow me to elevate and learn more, and so that I can do better. And then in turn, have a different impact, a better return. I'm also told things like, well, there are kids, like you don't get to tell other people how to raise their kids. And in those respects, I agree that my job, my role here is to not tell people how to raise their kids, is not to tell people one way is better than the other. But again, to reflect back like, hey, let's take accountability here in our intentions and our impacts, and really lean into becoming aware that our impacts and our intentions might be, again, misaligned. I'm also told that there's no perfect parent. And I agree with you that there is no such thing as a perfect parent. I even think saying there's no perfect parent is still in some way valuing perfection as the gold standard. And I'm here to say no. Positive parenting is not synonymous with perfect parenting. Positive parenting is actually about focusing on the process, getting into those uncomfortable spaces, getting into those spaces to become self-reflective, so that we can start to honor our own practice, our own process, and value our own efforts. I'm also told things like there's no manual. And again, here I am. I'm going to say, I agree. I agree there's no manual. However, there is a lot of great information and great supports on how to meet children in developmentally appropriate spaces, on how to create and set effective and healthy and not harmful boundaries, how to use natural consequences to help support children in stressful moments rather than add more stress in those stressful moments. So though there is no parenting manual per se, there are a lot of great resources now, especially now in times of Google, in times of a lot of access on demand, even this podcast, to help create and empower you to form your own manual. Another common defense I hear is, well, every child is different. Like, you don't know what's right for mine, and what works for yours won't work for mine. And here I am to say, I agree. Every child is different. However, we also all typically respond to stress responses very similarly. Whenever we are inside of a threat, there are some pretty predictable outcomes to that. We went over it in the podcast about the fight response, the flight response, the freeze response, and the fawn response. So though every child will be triggered into one of those responses differently, it's a common human space to be triggered into that threat when we are experiencing threat. And my role here is to help create a space where your child does not see you as the threat, that your child feels safe with you as their caregiver, which means creating that relationship with your child, co-creating that relationship with them so that we can start to see where are our efforts, again, misaligned, so that we can get back into alignment. And finally, the thing that I am told by parents who are stepping into this, who are maybe feeling a lot of big emotions about positive parenting and the impact of this work and what it is they'll say, I'm trying, and that's all that matters. And again, I agree with you that trying it's a huge part. It takes so much courage and effort and vulnerability to step into spaces, to ask questions, to make mistakes, to work towards improving yourself. I just empower you and I encourage you to not find comfort in the phrase, I'm trying. And what I mean by that is when parents come to me and say, well, I'm trying to stop yelling, I see it, I invite them to say, who is that protecting? Is it protecting you, or is it protecting your child? Because your child is still experiencing the yelling. So though I encourage you and applaud you and want you to get into spaces that allow you to try, to take action, to make mistakes, to get up, to self-reflect and start that process again, I want you to release that you have to prove something, that you have to prove I'm trying to do it, and then put pressure on yourself to keep doing something that maybe you don't have that knowledge, skill set, support, access to. So I hope this is all tracking, because I think that this conversation is a big one. And I know that parenting is a very charged space in general. And I just think that, especially as a parenting coach, it can come with a lot of false beliefs of what my perspective is or what my role in this conversation is. And I know that those feelings of shame, they are sharp and they are heavy and they are painful. So that's what this episode is about. It's just kind of holding space, bringing light to those areas, saying that it's safe to feel uncomfortable. It's safe to feel those big emotions and really start to reinterpret what those big charged expressions really are. So I wanted to start by reflecting back and revisiting an episode from episode 5.3 and share those 3 assumptions that I make of all parents. And I think that some people think that parenting coaches, and myself included, that we hold 3 hurtful assumptions, that we think that asking for help means that you're inadequate, that we maybe think oh, you don't know. And I want you to know that that's false, that I actually think that asking for help means that you are amazing, that you are courageous, that you are stepping into spaces to better yourself and better your children. And that's incredibly brave. I also think that another common hurtful assumption in the positive parenting space is that other parents, quote unquote, just know what to do. Like we see it on social media and we see them portraying and projecting out this ideal of perfection. And so we just think like, oh, well, they just know what to do. And I want you to know that if they know, it's because they've been taught either through their own parents modeling these skills for them, or they have taken action to attain that knowledge and education themselves. No one is just born knowing how to set boundaries, because that's something that is learned. Like no one is just born leaning into natural consequences, because it's actually going counter our instincts, and our instincts is to protect and survive. So positive parenting is really about getting into a space that invites us to regulate ourselves, to get out of those instinctual survival skills and get into a more thriving space that creates a sense of safety. And then the third hurtful assumption to revisit that we dug into in the past episode is that bad parents work with parenting coaches. And this is what we're digging in today, because I do not believe in bad parents. It's a controversial take. I actually have a Instagram post going up later tonight that says, "Good parents yell." And I have a feeling that it's going to create a lot of conversations, because I know that there is no such thing as a bad parent. I truly don't believe it. And I empower and encourage you to get out of this good, bad binary as well. And that's what we're talking about today. We're teasing them out, because instead of being grounded in these three hurtful assumptions, I actually believe in these three other assumptions. I am assuming that you are a good parent, because I believe that all parents are good parents, because I believe all people are good people. I have the assumption that you are currently trying. I never assume that you're not trying. I think you're always trying. I think parents are some of the most dedicated and amazing people there are, because they are taking care and fostering and cultivating the next generation. And I know that that comes with an immense amount of pressure. And I also know that it comes with an immense amount of effort. So I know you are trying. I'm never questioning that at all. And the third assumption I make is that you love your child. That is never anything that I ever question when working with clients. And when we're, again, going into this topic even more, it reminded me of a quote from Brené Brown in her book, Atlas of the Heart, which is the source for a lot of today's content. And this quote was at the very beginning. And I think it's a good space to hold here, to reflect in this space, because positive parenting is activating, and it's activating a lot of, oh, I wish I'd known different, or I should have known that, or oh, of course that would have worked, or yeah, I get it. And all of those like shame triggers come up, or all those big feelings of guilt come up. And I want to invite you to be gentle with yourself in those moments. So what Brené Brown says in her book, she says, "I've also learned that when you hold someone accountable for hurtful behavior and they feel shame, that's not the same thing as shaming someone. I am responsible for holding you accountable in a respectful and productive way. I am not responsible for your emotional reaction to that accountability." And as we're stepping into unpacking mom guilt and mom shame, I really wanted to honor you that if big feelings are coming up, if there's activations, that I want you to be gentle with yourself in those activations. Or if you see a social media post and it triggers like some sort of trigger of like, oh, guilt, I want you to listen to that. I want you to listen to it. I want you to give it the mic, not to believe it, not to condone it, but I want you to give it air. And I want you to give it air so that we can see that it's giving you a message. Just like last week's episode was talking about how all emotions are sending us messages. And it's just listening and observing and interpreting that message correctly. Remember, last week, we talked about how emotion is what influences our attention. Emotions, we can sense our emotions with the experiences and our feelings in our body. We can observe the emotions by witnessing and collecting that data. And then we can interpret those emotions, which is making sense of that. I even shared in the last episode about how my old message influenced my behavior. So when I felt guilt, it was actually shame. And then my behavior was to freeze. I was stunned. Whenever things popped up like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, I would get stuck in the freeze response because I would think like, oh my gosh, I've messed up. I was bracing myself for the punishment. I was bracing myself for the lecture. I was bracing myself for the fallout. And really, I needed to slow down here and kind of get very clear on those differences. And when I got very clear on that story of what was the message there and what was the emotion, what was I sensing, what was my experience, what was it trying to tell me, I really started to learn that guilt actually meant that I had violated my values. And now when I feel guilt, now when I think like, ooh, I messed up or I made a mistake, now when I think like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, now I am quick to go back into taking action into repair. But it came from me slowing down, took me slowing back, bringing some light into a very uncomfortable space for me so that I could start to feel supported and safe in that space, having this emotion, feeling that message. And that's what led me into wanting to talk about it in the relationship to mom guilt, because I see mom guilt toted a lot on social media. I hear mom guilt at the park. I hear mom guilt at Starbucks. I hear mom guilt everywhere. It's this constant pool. And from what I know now, that guilt means violated values, it then becomes curious to say, okay, well, let's connect back to our values and let's see where we can make the repair. But I see many do what I used to do, which is just freeze and get so stuck in it. So instead of seeing guilt as that trigger into repair, that trigger into reconnection, that trigger into accountability, that trigger into apologizing and behavior change, I see many do what I did, which is actual shame, where it feels heavy, where I start to feel like I'm not enough, or I start to feel like I'm walking through mud and it feels clunky and messy and heavy. And I want you to know that if that's been your experience, that you're safe here, you're okay. It's okay to have these feelings, to have this sensation, and to really slow down and bring light to this so that then we can start to make different choices. We can start taking different actions. Brain break moment. All right. I know that I can go deep way fast. So let's just take a pause here to take a deep breath in and let it out. And listen while I let you know that this episode is brought to you by me, Megan, and my Positive Parenting Class Pass. Positive Parenting Class Pass are 6 simple positive parenting classes to kickstart your positive parenting journey. Those classes include Positive Parenting 101, which is a class that is just designed to give you the first steps in what positive parenting is and what it is not. Second class is Emotional Validation. In this class, we dig into how can we show up to have your child feel seen and heard in their lived experience. The third class is Setting Boundaries, all about communicating, enforcing, and allowing testing of your secure and consistent and firm boundaries. The fourth class is a class called Ending Entitlement. Inside of this class, we dig into how we are showing up using tools of entitlement and how we can start to release those tools and begin practicing tools of empowerment and choice. And we know that what we put down, they're going to pick up. The fifth class is a class all about natural consequences. This is a class that gets very clear, and you'll walk away knowing what an imposed consequence is, what a logical consequence is, and most importantly, how to begin utilizing natural consequences so your children begin learning from their lived experience. And the final class is a class all about apologizing. I like to say that connection is the most skipped over step and recovery is the least utilized step. So in that step, you'll start to learn how to show up and use impactful and effective apologies so that your child knows that you see them and hear them and care about them. If you are looking to begin your journey today, then I highly encourage you go to bekindcoaching.com/classpass and dig into the classes starting today. As my free gift, you will receive Raising Respectful Kids, which is my 3-part video series all about how to stop focusing on adding on more decorations to your child and to you and to your relationship, and instead starting to reinforce and build a solid and secure foundation together. I can't wait to hear all of your amazing wins from the steps that you take inside of Positive Parenting ClassPass. All right, ready to get back to our episode? Before we get back, let's take one more deep breath together. And take a deep breath in and let it out. And let's go. To really contextualize this more, I'm going to pull in that Brene Brown book, Atlas of the Heart, that I said. In this book, she talks about all the different places we go, and she kind of makes it's a dictionary of sort of all of these different emotions and expressions. And inside of the book, Atlas of the Heart, she talks about the places we go when we fall short. And she talks about humiliation, she talks about shame, and she talks about guilt. So in here, using her definitions, her definition of guilt is an emotion we experience when we fall short of our own expectations or standards. That's in alignment with my new definition of guilt as well. That guilt means that we've violated our values. So with guilt, the focus is on having done something wrong and on doing something that sets things right. So when we experience guilt, when we experience a mistake, when we experience that feeling of like, oh, wait, we didn't do what we said we were going to do. We didn't meet our own expectations. Those feelings of like, man, damn. Now we can start to listen to that message and have it trigger us into apologizing and changing our behavior. Her definition of shame from this book is shame is an intensely painful feeling or experience of believing we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and connection. With shame, the focus is on being inherently wrong and unworthy. Shame stuns and shrinks you. Shame triggers you into that freeze response. I know shame. I feel shame. I am constantly, not constantly, but I'm always, I would say at least once a day, faced with this distinction, coming back, connecting me back to my worthiness, connecting me back to moments of my own struggle and sufferings to invite me to dig into my own deepening of self-compassion. And when I was creating this episode and looking at examples and thinking about like, where do I see it? How do I see it? How can I become more attuned to picking up on it? I thought about those memes. And I see them often shared again with humor attached to it. It's a form of connection. And I think, wow, we're connecting in that we are all experiencing this sense of not being good enough and connecting in our own shame. So I thought about this one picture. It was a letter board. And on it, it says, behind every great kid is a mom who's pretty sure she's screwing it all up. I used to see these and I'm like, ha ha ha, those are kind of funny. However, when we really settle into the message, it's saying behind every great kid is a mom who does not feel enough, is a mom who is feeling shame, a mom who is feeling frozen, And I think, wow, like how much time are we wasting in that space? What if we said behind every great kid is a mom who knows her worth and value as well? How radical is that? I know it goes against social norms. I know it goes against a lot of our upbringing and a lot of our conditioning. But if we want our children to know how great they are, we give what we can hold. It's an invitation for us as adults and caregivers to connect back to how great we are. Another thing I found was called Mom Guilt Bingo. So on this is a bingo card, and on it is just a whole long list of things that parents judge themselves and others in. So on this card, there's things like pizza for dinner. There's things like using TV as a babysitter. It's things like threw away their artwork, screen time of any kind, hiding in the bathroom. It's things that we think that parents shouldn't do or are bad for doing. We start to tie morality into it. And again, it's normalizing this, but it's normalizing in a way that continues on shame cycles, where now we feel like we are not good enough for these things. I'm going to call out Chelsea, who just left a comment in the chat. She said, I've seen shame for things like having a C-section and breastfeeding. Yes. What other things? I want you to think about them now. What are the other things that we create this binary? There's one that is good and there's one that is bad. This thing is good. This thing is bad. It starts to pull up into this bigger conversation of really teasing out and shining light on, we don't know what's right for other people. We do know what's right for us, and connecting us back to listening to us. Listening to us. When we think about behavior is communication, this is a common theme in all of my work. I use this iceberg model a lot. The iceberg, if we think about the iceberg that sunk the Titanic, the iceberg that sunk the Titanic, they made their decisions on the Titanic based on what they could see, based on what was popping up out of the surface of the water. The reason why the Titanic sank is that they were unaware of how big the iceberg was underneath the water because they couldn't see it. Same with us. What we see on the surface, that's our behavior. That's what's just poking up out of the surface. What's supporting our behavior are our thoughts, our feelings, and our beliefs. That's what's going on underneath the surface. That's the stuff that we can't see, we don't see. And so when we think about the behavior of guilt is saying things like, well, why did I do that? Right? The focus is on the thing that I did. It sounds like, well, I yelled. That means I must need a break. We're now seeing our own behavior as data, and we can observe it. We take that information, we filter it through, and we're like, whoa, okay, there's a break, there's a rupture here. I need to start reconnecting and repairing that rupture. Because guess what? I don't want to yell anymore. It doesn't feel good to yell. I don't like yelling. I want to now start to take action to remediate yelling. So the focus in this is focused on the action. And the value that I'm responding from is self-compassion. The self-compassion value allows me to separate myself from what I did, from the action or the behavior I did. Being grounded in self-compassion allows me to say, hey, I yelled, and that must mean I need a break. This is what it means. I was snippy. That means that I'm overtaxed. My bandwidth is taxed. What's another thing that I do? I'm going to speak from my own. I can't stop crying, right? Every little thing is making me cry. Well, maybe that means that I need to eat something. It invites me to self-reflect and be like, halt, hunger, anger, lonely, tired. Are any of those big tripwires not fulfilled? How can I fill those needs so that I can start to feel better, because I know that I'm worthy of care and support. I know that this behavior is telling me something else is going on below, and then I can meet that need and build those skills. Versus shame. Shame kind of can present the same way, but shame on the outside invites us to say, why did I do that? Right? We start to say things like, I yelled. That must mean I'm a bad mom. I made this mistake because I'm a shitty mom. I start to identify myself with what I did. Really, the focus here then is morality. And the value is that I'm valuing perfectionism. I'm valuing that there is a good mom and there is a bad mom. I am valuing that good moms do these things and bad moms do these things. I'm starting to now label myself. And when I label myself, I get trapped in it. I then start to judge myself and others. That becomes the binary. It becomes, now I see categories as this is what good moms do and this is what bad moms do. Feeling, doing this invites us then to judge not only ourselves, but then we also start to judge our children. Because if I believe that there are good ways and bad ways, then I'm going to believe for them that there are good ways and bad ways for them to act. It starts to feel like, oof, I need to make sure that they are good kids. This is a topic that I go deep on inside of Raising Respectful Kids. If you're not a member yet, Raising Respectful Kids is a 3-part video series, and we dig into this. We start to talk about what is a good kid, what is a good parent, what is a good relationship. And inside of this program, I say, great news, you're a good parent. You're a good parent. You are a person inherent of worth and care, just as is. And perhaps your behavior is communicating that you're missing skills and needs. And then I pose the question, are you listening to that behavior? Are you listening to yourself when you yell, inviting you to say, hey, woo, something's going on here. This is triggering an alert. This is saying, hey, pay attention here. Just like your car, when you're out of washer fluid, sends up an alarm. Just when you're near end of gas, it sends up an alarm. We're the same. So are you listening to those, or are you defending them? Are you falling into the good, bad parent trap again, where bad parents yell, punish, ignore, and judge, and good parents are calm, validate, listen, and curious? We start to see things in either ors. We can even go deeper, as I do in Raising Respectful Kids, to say that you see it in society, you see it in videos, you see it in movies, you see it in books, this fantasy of the good parent. And the good parent keeps their kids happy. The good parent is very nurturing. The good parent never has kids that cry. The good parent always is close by and quick to react. They're able to read their children's minds and predict what their kids need and just remove all of the struggles. The good parent also is protective. They provide a solution. They provide the fix-it rescue at every opportunity they can. They are always calm, and they're always happy and pleasant and in control. And when we believe that that is what dictates what a good parent is, we're missing a whole other side of just the humanness. We're missing anger. We're missing conflict resolution. We're missing the struggle. We're missing the skills. When we have this idea of like, this is what a good parent is, and this is what it means, when we fall short on here, as we will, because this list is rooted in perfection. When we fall short, it's easy then to get tripped into the shame. To think of like, oh my gosh, I'm not a calm mom. It's just not me. I wish I could be a better mom. I guess I'm a bad mom. And instead, I want you to think about this as saying like, oops, I made a mistake and I want to repair it. I want to learn from it. I want to grow from it. I want to take these signals just as I see the data on my dashboard in my car giving me signals of saying like, hey, put your attention here. Remember, our emotion focuses our attention. Our attention needs to be here. What's going on here? Because you are a good and worthy person raising good and worthy people. We're just wanting to change our methods and change our behaviors, and that is 100% doable. So I invite you to consider and ask yourself, where do you go when you fall short? Do you go into the guilt, which is like, oops, I've made a mistake and I want to repair it? Or do you get sucked into the freeze of shame? Like, I can't get this right. I'm a bad mom. And why this is an important conversation to be having, because then again, we reflect that out. We project it out to kids. We then start to say that there's good kids and bad kids. We can see it when they come back home from school. And they'll report to us about the bad kids. They'll report to us about the kids that they're not playing with. They'll report how the teacher acted to that one kid. And if your kids aren't in school yet, I invite you to connect back to when you were in school. If I were to ask you who are the bad kids, would you have been able to tell me? Chances are yes. Why do I know this? Because I was the bad kid. I was the kid who was causing troubles. I was the kid that was struggling. I was the kid that other kids stayed away from. And really, I can tell you 100% is because I was struggling and people were missing the signs of my struggle and instead just labeling me as the bad kid because I did not fit in to the fantasy of what a good kid is. The good kid is a great listener. A good kid does things the first time, every time. A good kid wants to do everything their parents want. A good kid does their homework on time and by themselves. A good kid is nice to everyone all the time. The fantasy of a good kid also makes us believe that a good kid is in total control of their emotions all the time, that they use their words all the time, that they make good choices, that they're well behaved, and that they share with others. And I know for me growing up, I fell way short of this a lot of the time. And then I started to believe that I was the mistake, that I started to believe that I was the bad kid. I started to take that on. And the adults in my life reinforced that belief with their actions and their behaviors. They missed that space for me to support me in my struggle. Why? Because they were missing it when in supporting their needs when they struggled. Where they went when they fell short was exactly where they met me and took me when I fell short. Instead of meeting me with guilt, with this like, oops, you've made a mistake, let's repair it. Let's start to build those skills. Let's start to dig in here. Let's start to communicate that it's safe to make mistakes. They started to show up with a lot of shame. They would say things like, well, why'd you do that? What's wrong with you? Why are you acting like that? And it took me a long time to shine lights in those spaces, to normalize that space, to reconnect and say, no, I'm not a bad kid. I'm a good kid who was having a lot of stress and struggle go unsupported. I truly believe that there is no such thing as a bad mom, and I truly believe that there is no such thing as a bad kid. I do not believe that people are bad. I do believe that people can do bad things. I do believe that people can have bad behavior. I do believe that people can make poor choices, low quality choices, but I do not believe that people are bad. I truly believe that this digs into fear-based punishments. I truly believe that when we begin associating mistakes as threats, when we are parented with punishments for our mistakes, when those were mistakes like a failed grade or a blowout or lying or anything, hitting, spitting, kicking, when I was in a tantrum or a meltdown, and when those moments of stress and struggle are met with punishments and shame and blame, it's only natural that now as an adult, when I'm in those same situations of making mistakes, that all of those moments come up and I then go to punish myself. If I had all of my needs met, what would that look like? If I need to ask for help and support, what would that look like? Because I know that when I'm feeling better, I do better. And when I know that, I can extend that out to everyone. That when you feel better, I know that you're going to do better. Same with children. This is why I advocate for removing fear-based punishments. That's why I've dedicated my whole platform, this podcast, my classes, everything I teach, in helping bring more parents into this conversation, to shine lights into this and say, hey, you're a good and worthy human. Let's address the methods and behaviors. Let's address your knowledge. Let's address your practicing of those skills so that you can feel more supported. Because I know that when you feel better, you'll do better as well. So in closing, let's consider, here are the questions that I want you to take and journal on or dig into more. I invite you to think about what mistakes that you hide from others. I invite you to consider, how much time do you spend thinking about that mistake? And then the last question, I invite you to think, what would it feel like to share that mistake and feel acceptance, compassion, and support? To help shift you out of that mom shame and shift you into listening to those messages of guilt and saying, hey, this is a moment for me to reconnect back. Hey, this is me acting out of alignment to my values and the invitation to connect back. Just as guardrails on the highway help direct and keep you safe, we can start to think about those big moments that we experience in that same way, helping guide us back to it. So now I am curious, I invite you, if you have taken notes or have any thoughts or takeaways, I want to know them. I love to know them. And there are 3 ways to share. The first way to share is by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. The second way to share is to share your thoughts and takeaways on social media and tag me. And the third way is to share your thoughts inside our dedicated post inside our Facebook community, Positive Parenting with Megan Ford. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for staying here, tuning in, and staying to the end. My mission in life is to help parents feel supported and empowered in doing this work. This podcast, my Facebook community, and all of my programs and book club all help parents work through the phases of awareness, education, and practice. And if you are ready to take the next step, or if you want to go deeper, I encourage you to check out Positive Parenting 101. Inside of this 45-minute class, you'll learn more about what positive parenting is and isn't, so that you can start putting down tools with negative impacts and start replacing them with positive parenting tools. To get started today, you can visit bekindcoaching.com/classpass. And as my free gift to you, you will receive access to Raising Respectful Kids. What we talked about and what I shared about earlier in this episode, talking through what is a good parent, what is a good kid, what is a good relationship, you'll find that even more inside of that program. Friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for continuing to show up and encourage and support yourself and others. And I cannot wait to see you next week. Bye, friends.